everyone, this is Mindy Egan for My Favorite Things, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how I used my stamp images with no coloring needed. I know sometimes we see a stamp set that we absolutely love the images, but maybe we're not so comfortable with coloring or they're really small areas. So today, I'm going to show you how you can still use that stamp set. The sets that I'm going to be using today are the Fairy Best Friend, which has these beautiful fairy images. I also have the Rainbow Critters that I'll be using a sentiment from, and then the Pastures, Ponds, and Pools stencil. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my images since this is the easiest part out of the card. And all you need to do is just stamp them on white cardstock in black ink. I have two fairy images here that I picked out, and I'm stamping down onto the 80-pound white cardstock using the My Favorite Things Extreme Black ink. I am definitely the type of person that will shy away from images that get a little too skinny for coloring in the areas, and I think this is a great solution to still be able to use those adorable images. So I cut them out with the coordinating die, and I'm going to set them off on the side while I work on my background. What I think is really funny about this background is when I first pulled this stencil out of the package, I thought it was an abstract background until I turned it over and read the actual label that said pastures, ponds, and pools. And I was like, well, I still thought it looked like an abstract background, so that is what I'm going to use it for. I placed it down over 80-pound white cardstock, and I masked off the areas that showed the white cardstock off on the side because I don't want ink on any of those other areas. Then I'm blending on Twisted Citron and Squeezed Lemonade. I'm only using these two colors to do my abstract background, and these are in the regular distress inks because I love the vibrancy of these colors. After I have this first one ink blended onto my background, I'm going to carefully peel back my Post-it tape. You could use washi tape, or Post-it notes would be actually my recommendation because Post-it notes are very low tack stick and won't rip your paper. Post-it tape, I'm going to be reusing this. This is about a 2-inch Post-it tape. So I'm just taking that largest area again on my stencil, kind of positioning it at a different angle on my background. And then once again, I am going to mask off all of those areas because I am definitely known for getting ink where I don't want it. So as long as I have the rest of the card covered up, I can go ahead and start ink blending again. Now you could switch up colors. You could use a rainbow of colors. I just really loved the look of this. To me, it's fairy colors, these bright greens and bright yellows that remind me of a forest color. So after I blended that one down, I removed the Post-it tape, shifted that same design once again to the bottom corner, masked off my areas, and blended that Squeezed Lemonade and Twisted Citron. Now my background is done, and I can carefully peel away that Post-it tape to reveal these beautiful bright colors. I am definitely also one that likes to have a nice white margin on my card front, so I'm going to bring this over to my paper trimmer and just trim off about 1/4 of an inch from each edge, and that just gives a nice clean finished look around the entire card front. So this is going to end up measuring 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I'm going to bring this over to my mini Misty stamping tool, and I'm lining up my images about where I want them to be so I know where to line up the sentiment. The sentiment comes from the Rainbow Critters stamp set, and I'm using my Misty corner to just help line that up straight on the front of the card. Then I can pick that up with the Door of the Misty, remove that Misty corner, and then ink this up. And I'm going to ink it up in a VersaFine black ink because sometimes I know stamping on Distress Oxide or Distress inks can be tricky. So I went with the VersaFine Clear ink to stamp that sentiment. VersaFine also takes a little while to dry, so I'm going to speed up that process with my heat tool. Now I can't have a fairy card without adding some sparkles, so I'm bringing in Zinnia, I believe it is, and Confetti White Perfect Pearls. I'm scooping a little bit out onto a craft mat. I'm going to add a couple drops of water to each, and then I'm going to mix those colors up with a paintbrush. So I have 2 separate paintbrushes for each color. Once I have that mixed up, I'm going to sprinkle that onto or flick that onto the background, but I don't want to get that over my sentiment. So I just ripped apart a Post-it note and covered that up. And then I'm picking up that first one there, which I think is Zinnia. It's like a green shade. It's hard to tell with the distressed background that I created, but it does add a really nice sparkle to the background. If you want a finer mist of dots, you can take your mixture and put it on an acrylic block and flick it that way as well. That'll get you really fine splatters. To add my fairies to the background, I wanted to pop them up. So I am taking some thin foam squares and adding it to the back of the fairies. The main fussy part of this whole entire card is probably me trimming those foam squares into these little skinny strips so I can add support behind the legs of the fairies. Then I can just remove the backing of that foam square and add my fairies onto the front of the card. I like to try and create visual triangles on the front of my card, which is what I attempted to do with my fairies in the sentiment, and that is how I decided on the placement. I have that one fairy up towards the top, then one kind of down a little bit from it, and finished off with the sentiment towards the bottom. And then I'm taking some double-sided foam sheets, and I'm going to add this to the back of my panel. I just trimmed it slightly smaller than my panel. And then I can add this to a white card front. So like I had mentioned before, I really like having that white border around the edge of my blended panel. I think it helps separate that color a little bit. That finishes off my card project for today. I hope this has inspired you and given you lots of ideas to use your stamped images. Thanks so much for joining.